Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, Build an Integrated Search Strategy Across Google, Amazon, and YouTube, presented by Similarweb and Search Engine Land. Before we begin, if you have any audio issues, click on the audio icon on your screen to enable your audio. And if you have any viewing issues, you can use the Q&A section at any time to communicate with us. You can send questions directly to the speaker about his presentation at any time. Without further ado, let's get to the presentation. Joining us today is Gerald Murphy, Senior Solutions Business Manager, SEO at Similarweb. Welcome, Gerald. I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you very much indeed, Cynthia. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be looking at an integrated search strategy. And the reason for it is because search engine strategy has never been more important. So let's dig into some data. When we look at the United States, we can clearly see that digital transformation is here, and COVID has excelled it massively. So much so, previously, Q4 in the United States was the biggest time of the year for online traffic. What we saw during COVID is in Q1 of 2021, that actually surpassed all of historical Q4s. In other words, we've actually seen new peaks online due to COVID. And essentially what it's made us do is change our behavior. We're now looking at online as being a really trustworthy source of information. And actually, as a result, things like transactions are occurring there a lot more than ever, even just gathering information. So we're actually building up a really strong connection online. And crucially, brands need to be doing this too. So it's never been more important to have really good keyword rankings, to think about different search engines in their own right, and all of those good things. And that's why today we're going to be taking you through an integrated search strategy. But this isn't just the case in the United States, it's also the case in the United Kingdom. And in fact, you can also see very similar trends. In fact, 2020 saw record traffic to e-commerce websites in the UK. So for anyone that's in a multiple market, a brand that's in multiple markets, this is your time. This is the time to be looking at search globally and at market level. And the same goes for all digital channels. So when we actually just don't look at traffic overall and we break it down by channel, you can see there are two dominant channels online. Direct traffic, so for example, going to walmart.com, or alternatively, search, which is a combination of PPC, pay per click, and SEO, search engine optimization. Now, interestingly here for the United States, you can see that it's not always about mobile in the digital world. In fact, when it comes to referral traffics and display in the United States, that's still much higher on desktop than it is on mobile. Interestingly, you can see that search is huge on mobile. And this also needs to reinforce us to think about a search strategy, also doing that by device. Interestingly, when we look at the UK, same data, you can see that the actual mobile traffic in the United Kingdom is much higher in terms of percentage differences across devices. So although, yes, we often talk about mobile all the time, it's not always about the same level or extensive use of mobile in multiple markets. And again, this further reinforces the need to build an integrated search strategy that works across multiple devices. And ultimately, the benefit of doing this is when you do that, it positively impacts your direct traffic. So when a brand ranks a lot more on Google, Amazon, and YouTube, for example, people will associate that brand with those terms. And as a result, once they know the website, your homepage, they'll start typing for that information. So crucially, this integrated search strategy allows us to do this and actually helps you to grow not just the search channel, specifically SEO. Actually, you can start plugging in some promoted display ads, for example, from a performance marketing perspective. Even more so, it positively impacts direct traffic. So the knock-on effect of this is huge. So let's jump in to the game of search across Amazon, Google, and YouTube. Before we get into best practices, I want to just showcase some more data to really reinforce that when we talk about integrated search, we need to be search engine specific. So to do that, what we did is we downloaded, roughly speaking, the top 20,000 keywords from each search engine individually. That is across Google, Amazon, and YouTube. We analyzed search volume trends of those keywords. And then what we did is did an overlap and gap analysis of the big three. These three search engines are typically described as the big three because they are, for the most part, the largest search engines in the world of Amazon, Google, and YouTube. So let's jump in so you can start winning on the big three. On the left-hand side, you can see the United States. On the right-hand side, you can see the United Kingdom. And the first obvious difference here is that Amazon is much bigger in the United States versus the UK. Having said that, in the UK, it's still the second largest search engine of the big three. So a huge opportunity here on Amazon. And in fact, 33% of additional searches are occurring on Amazon in the United States versus the UK. Interestingly, YouTube is the third largest search engine across both markets. But interestingly, in the United Kingdom, it provides a bigger opportunity when it comes to demand, i.e. search volume and searches. Let's now pay our attention to clicks. So when people actually physically get a mouse or cursor on a laptop and actually click on a result, what you can see is Amazon is the largest search engine in terms of interaction that happens online. And in the United Kingdom, Google has a lot more interaction compared to Amazon. Now, that might be for a range of different reasons. Typically, the United States leads the world when it comes to digital. For example, Cyber Monday hasn't really been a thing in Europe overall as a region, a continent, except for the last few years. So typically, this behavior will have a domino effect in the rest of the world, which is even more important to look at your market level strategies. So it's not just about searches. It's not just about clicks. It's making sure we're looking at all three of these engines. And that's why we want to spend the bulk of today's talk on how you can build an integrated search strategy. So the first thing that we want to cover is the brilliant basics. EAT is crucial. EAT, as it's abbreviated. And it stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So we all got to be an expert, have authority, and trust online. But it makes sense. Us human beings also love this, not just the search engines. So what do we mean by that? Let's break it down. When we talk about expertise, particularly in the e-commerce space, we need to have authors. We need to have specialist writers. So whether that's someone who specializes in electronics, whether that's someone else who specializes in outdoor furniture or gardening, we need to have those writers. And we, in essence, need to build entities online. So editors and expert reviewers can help you as a brand to do that. You want to also provide additional context about their credentials. So is it a case that that person who's an expert in electronics has actually done something like an IT degree that's actually directly relevant to what that particular skill set is? What are their actual hobbies outside of the world of work? Is that also connected to what that expert or specialty skill is? That can be really, really critical. And crucially, it's making sure that we're explicitly endorsing that person, whether that's links to social media profiles. For example, do they have a professional Twitter account? In which case you'll maybe want to link to that. Search engines also look at this layer of information as you and I, as a human being, would do. The second bit, which you can see in the middle of this slide, is around authority. It's not just about actually investing in individual experts in terms of expertise. We want to make sure we're earning personal and organizational placement on things like Google Knowledge Graph, using, for instance, structured data. This actually helps us to become an expert in the field and actually for the results to be displayed as such. This not only increases brand awareness, it actually gains other things like backlinks and links from authoritative sources, for example, Wikipedia. And finally, the last letter in EAT stands for trustworthy. Disclose information about your business, such as the company mission, its editorial and advertising policies, how its founders and leadership's team formed, what are their backgrounds, why are they in those roles, what's their experience. They're all likely to have that experience in working in as a chief head of marketing, as a director of marketing. They're now the CMO of the company. That experience really, really is useful. If they have a LinkedIn profile, even better, link to that on their individual pages. And also become transparent. So it's not just about like money itself. It's also things like if you have an affiliate program, make disclosures that you have one and what are the sort of terms and conditions of that. That can really help you to become a lot more trustworthy online. For e-commerce websites, it's things like a return policy. Be clear. Do you have, for example, a 7-day full money guarantee back when you don't like a product? It's clearly explain that online. Human beings also love this information. So always remember the brilliant basics. EAT. Now, the first thing that we need to do once we've got EAT, and we'll come back to that shortly, is to work out for your audience which one or multiple search engines would be most suitable for them. So if you're in e-commerce and you have products, for example, you've got a fashion store, Amazon actually might be highly suitable because you can sell things like t-shirts, jeans, and so on Amazon. Alternatively, you may not actually be in e-commerce. Having said that, you might be in e-commerce, but you don't want to sell on Amazon, for example, in which case you'll maybe want to look at YouTube in addition to your Google strategy. So there's a little combination here for you to figure out what you think would work incredibly well for your audience. Even more powerful, ask your audience. Hey guys, do you visit YouTube often? What sort of information are you looking for? This can be incredibly valuable for you to start building up that information for you to become an expert, an authority, trustworthy, and also to use your audience so that you can start to shape your own search strategy. The other thing you can very quickly do is actually use the Google results itself to diagnose what type of strategy Google sees you as being. Now, this is biased towards one engine, and this particular tactic isn't truly an integrated search strategy, but it is a nice little get started guide, if you like. So let's break this down. On the left-hand side, you can see when you do a search for LED lights, you can see there's an Amazon double bubble. Basically, what that means is Google is displaying two different pages from Amazon's website and stacking them right above each other. That's what we call a double bubble. What that would actually indirectly indicate is that Google sees that the intent for this keyword is so commercialized. It's highly likely that this searcher wants to go to Amazon. As a result, it actually ranks Amazon twice, followed then by other brands, in this case, Philips Lighting, or as they're known, Signify. In the middle, you can see things like air conditioning units. You can see it's a very typical Google SERP. So it has a mix of paid search. When you scroll down, it's also got things like people also ask. It has images on there. That's a really diverse SERP. And as a result, that actually might be more biased towards Google itself. In other words, air conditioning unit is probably a really good term for a Google strategy as opposed to Amazon or YouTube. However, when you do a search for things like James Bond, you can see how dominant YouTube is itself. So it's got here, for example, 3 videos on the first results. One of the videos, in fact, has a timeline where you can actually skip to a certain section within that video. And that would be a big, strong indication indirectly using Google's data that that particular keyword or topic is more relevant for YouTube as opposed to Google or Amazon. So this is a nice way on the fly, which you can start doing using keywords that actually matter to you, is literally just looking at Google search results. And that can really help you to diagnose initially what types of things are going on there. And now you can use this information to now start building and thinking about an integrated search strategy. So the rest of the presentation is going to be a lot more detailed by each search engine. Essentially, when we break search engines down, Amazon is all about products, Google is all about EAT, and YouTube is all about videos. But crucially, Google actually is a mix of everything. So there's a secondary focus involved. It's about things like what categories am I ranking for? Product pages are also ranked on Google, and there's a range of different SERP features. And SERP features, we can have a whole session on that individually. Essentially, it's maximizing digital assets. It's things like Google Maps. All of those types of things can really, really help you to build your search strategy within one engine. So it's not just using today's webinar and stopping there. Really become inspired and have a look and see what else can I do differently, even for one search engine. Know the different search behaviors on each search engine. In its simplest form, we Google to find, we Amazon to buy, and we YouTube to watch. But critically, our search behavior is massively different for each of these search engines themselves. So you can see here on the bottom left-hand side, when we are on Google for the topic of air conditioning units, we use really broad terms like just air conditioning units. We'll also maybe do a search for things like air conditioning unit for small room. However, when we're on Amazon, our search behavior is much more precise. We're looking for things like portable air conditioning units, quiet air conditioning units. That's not to say we don't do this at all on Google. It happens a lot more on Amazon than it does on Google. And critically, that's actually exposing other things like bias towards your metrics. Never just look at Google search volume and think that that same thing happens on Amazon. Look for search engine specific metrics. And in fact, interestingly, when it comes to air conditioning units, on YouTube, it's more about what happens after a buyer buys a product. So it's in essence post sales. And what we mean by that is people are actually thinking about, how do I wash an air conditioning unit? How do I hide an air conditioning unit? They're actually thinking about, when I buy this thing, what advice and what pieces of content, in this case, what videos can I watch so that I am actually fully comfortable to actually give my money over to a company, your brand, and actually then go and buy an air conditioning unit. So this is really powerful, because what it's doing is getting into consumer intent and consumer behaviors, and it's tying that to an actual search engine itself. So Google, I'm assuming most people do and have a Google search strategy, some more advanced than others, but the reality is we need to be looking at a lot more, regardless of how advanced we are. For anyone that hasn't really thought about their Google strategy, in its simplest form, there are three things involved. The first is EAT. We've already covered it, but just to recap, you don't want to be creating a blog post just for the sake of your marketing department saying we need to create and publish 3 blog posts a week. Stop doing that. What we need to be doing is doing things differently. We need to be looking less at our competitors in the sense of they do this, let us follow. Do things better. That is exactly what EAT is all about. The second pillar is all around content signals. So for example, if you write a backlink, if you write a blog post, for example, does that actually generate a backlink, i.e. a vote to your website? How many social media shares have you got? If they're really on the lower end, it's highly likely that the foundation level, in this case EAT, is wrong. You need to really start thinking about, how can I increase engagement and what am I doing wrong to better get your content signals increased? And third and finally, when it comes to Google, it's all around the brilliant basics. Have a strong technical foundation. Of course, look at things like page speed, as it's sometimes called, Core Web Vitals or Google Page Speed. They're really important, but making sure that search engines can also find your website. But critically, think about your users. We don't like to wait long, especially online. Like, would you imagine wanting to go to your local coffee store this morning or tomorrow morning and having to wait 15, 20 minutes for a coffee? We don't want to wait for 15, 20 milliseconds online, let alone minutes in the real world. In essence, what we need to do here is to improve the user experience to make it a delightful experience online. When it comes to Amazon, the foundational level is product listings. Make sure product listings are fully completed. So for example, you've got things like titles, product descriptions. If you're even reselling a product, don't use the manufacturer's description. That is going against EAT. How are you becoming an expert if you're just copying and pasting content that's else like something else elsewhere in the web? The second pillar here is around keyword relevancy. We want to make sure that a product is highly relevant to the keywords you're targeting. I.e., if you're selling something like electrical plugs or timers, for instance, you want to make sure that you actually are selling a timer. You don't want someone to come into something that roughly speaking matches that product. Be precise. And thirdly, and finally in here, it's about trust, satisfaction, and retention. What we want to do in here is to make sure we're gaining authentic reviews. Now, this is even more critical actually when it comes to Google, because Google has just released at the start of this month actually, rolled out a new update. And a lot of websites have been negatively impacted, i.e. traffic is going down. Equally, some sites who have been doing reviews really well and authentically have actually been increasing in traffic. And what this means is on Amazon, it's a little bit further behind Google and it's like maturity levels. But what we want to do is just also think about, we're not just getting reviews for the sake of reviews' sake. Get really good reviews that properly go into details and are actually human beings doing it, your customers. Have things like low order defection rates, answered questions, and do things like monitor stock levels, price, and conversions, because Amazon is doing that in the background indirectly to help support their ranking. YouTube, on the other hand, is all around engagement. That is the cornerstone of YouTube. So by engagement, we mean things like how many views have you got, likes, subscribers, comments. And what that shows in YouTube's eyes is that you're producing and publishing optimized videos that is engaging people. They really like that. And actually, that's what we need to do. We're not just creating a YouTube video for 10 minutes because we have a piece of software and that's all it can do. We're moving away from that and truly asking ourselves, what should actually be the depth that we need to go into for the things that we're looking to achieve? Really think about it. And actually, when you start thinking of things like TikTok, it's all super quick. And it's really getting to the point quickly and making it really highly engaging. And that's not even included in today's webinar, but it is indirectly linked to YouTube. Second in here is around shareability. So it's making sure that videos are enabled to be shared online. I.e., you've given people permission to embed your YouTube video on their blog, for example. That actually helps you to generate backlinks to your YouTube video. And compelling thumbnails can help capture the attention as and when people are scrolling down those results on YouTube as a search engine. Third and finally in here, you've got content. So very similar to what we saw in the previous two search engines, where you can now start to see there's a certain element of overlap between some ranking factors. In the case of YouTube, title and descriptions and the transcription of that video is also important. Like Amazon, be precise. Is the keyword I'm targeting and the one I want to appear for also highly relevant to all of the video content? It's not just relevant to a section within the video, in which case you maybe want to create a series of videos relating to a few different terms. Like, for example, how to wash an air conditioning unit, how to install one, how to hide one. All of those things can really, really help you exceed. So this actually helps you to identify your core focus areas. But doing so, we need to start thinking about keywords. And to do that effectively, we need to be looking at keyword intent. In the old days of search, going back years ago, when the whole industry was a little bit more immature, and there were, for example, less of these webinars around, we used to categorize keywords into three categories. They are informational, navigational, and transactional. In today's world, thinking about the human, there are four ways in which we can categorize that information. They are awareness, consideration, decision, and inspirational. But the beauty of that is you can actually very nicely align them to search engine. So awareness keywords are usually very broad, have a lot of searches, but actually tend to generate a lot of zero clicks. So what do we mean by that? Searching for something like shoes gets a lot of searches and can really, really help you to get a lot of traffic to your website. But is it actually a good term to rank for? On Google, it is, not so much in the other engines. When it comes to consideration keywords, these actually apply to all three search engines across Amazon, Google, and YouTube. Decision, on the other hand, is when the searcher knows exactly what they want. It's a lot more skewed towards Amazon as a search engine. And finally, as we've seen, YouTube is highly relevant for more inspirational types of content. So you need to identify search engine differences and similarities to succeed online. Going forward from today, one of the key takeaways we can get is EAT is massive. Again, be different out there. If you look at even the results of a new topic you're writing a blog post about, you want to make sure that you're actually being completely different. You want to stand out and be an expert, have authority and trust. Keyword strategy. Build a unified keyword strategy that's aligned to the buyer's journey. And that's a really highly effective way to do this. So categorize. And if you don't have a lot of time, at least do this for your most important line of business or business unit. And categorize your keywords into awareness, consideration, decision, and inspiration. I'll talk about that on the next slide. And when it comes to focus areas, Amazon is about e-retail, Google is particularly around EAT, and YouTube is around engagement. You want to make sure that you're able to track your performance. So also having Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, even Amazon Seller Central, which is like Amazon Analytics, making sure that we're all set up for that so that we can properly monitor how we're performing online. Content is involved in all search engines, so making sure that we're eating our way. Be user-led. Amazon, product descriptions, be different. How can this thing help me? Why should I buy it? Google, EAT, really different content I've stumbled upon. Something that's actually completely different to what else you've seen elsewhere on a given topic. YouTube is all around descriptions like video transcripts and so on. And when it comes to keyword research and keyword intent, we have those 4 areas that we need to start thinking about and covering and writing content to succeed for each of those 4 stages of the buyer's journey. And monitoring is critical. But what wraps all of this up is EAT. We need to do that across the board. So user behavior and keyword research should also align. And it's incredibly complex. Broadly speaking, there are 6 ways or behaviors that we have online. So there's a concept of narrowing our search. So what we're doing is we're coming out, we're doing a query, we see loads of results, and then we think about, actually, if I rewrite my query like this, maybe I'll get more precise, narrowed results. On the flip side, we might want to do expansion, where we're maybe new to a topic. Maybe we haven't even bought, for example, an air conditioning unit before, in which case we're doing a search for that broad term. That's often why there's a lot of search volume. It's an awareness keyword. But then we start to uncover other results in there, like portable air conditioning units and things like hiding air conditioning units. We actually reformulate our query using this new information that we've gathered or new keywords around that particular topic. And of course, every search needs to end. We all quit. And this is one of the reasons why user behavior isn't baked into the algorithm. That's to say, search engines can't really tell if when you end a search, is it a case that you're getting onto the subway and there's no internet? Is it a case that your coffee's arrived and you no longer want to do that search? You want to go to your next destination? There are a lot of complications in the mix. And as a result, search engines are very cautious as to what human factors they use in their algorithms. Branded and non-branded keywords have actually a lot of similarities. So when you do a search, for example, for Facebook, 15% of people click on nothing. In other words, most people that do a search for Facebook actually click on Facebook's website. But in fact, when you look at things like Google itself, 80% click on nothing. It's much higher. Is it a case that when those people do a search for Google, they realize they're on Google and therefore they reformulate their query and then just kind of start their search process? So our behavior is incredibly complex, but a metric like Zeroclick can really help uncover really good keyword opportunities. So turning our attention to non-branded, what you can see is the word duvet as a keyword isn't a very good keyword because 88% of people don't click on anything. So when you just look at search volume, you'll typically find, oh, this is a good term, it's rising, it's a lot of searches. It's not really. It has a lot of zero clicks. In other words, you're highly unlikely to get traffic to your website if you rank really well for this particular keyword. On the flip side, when you look at things like duvet cover sets, it's a much better term. Yes, the search volume is significantly lower, but so too are the zero clicks. In this case, 43% of people click on nothing. Even better engaging terms are things like best duvet cover sets or even best duvet inserts. That actually has the lowest zero click when it comes to this particular topic. So again, you can also use Similarweb to help you to get these types of metrics. So going back to the buyer's journey, I keep mentioning keyword intent, thinking about the searcher and so on. There are 4 stages of the buyer's journey. The first is awareness. This is when the searcher does not know what they want. So in a keyword example, it would be something like paper. Paper is an example of an awareness keyword. When it comes to consideration, when the searcher is a little closer to what they want, a keyword like, for example, printer paper is an example of a consideration keyword. The searcher is a little bit more precise as to what they want, and in this case, they're more likely to print the document. As a result, if you can appear for this term, it's a much better keyword. Decision, on the other hand, is something like A4 printer paper. The searcher knows exactly what they want. They're not kind of ambiguous in terms of, am I looking for paper, wallpaper, newspaper, and so on. They're really precise. They have a printer. It's A4 size paper, and that's exactly what they want. And finally, you've got inspiration. This is where the searcher wants outside the box ideas. So it's not just that paper can print and be used in a printer. You can actually make things like, for example, airplanes out of printer paper. This is actually, particularly for YouTube, a really good type of video you can create, even for a very simple topic around paper for a confectionery store. So when you look at Amazon, you'll also start to see that when you start categorizing manually these keywords into awareness, consideration, decision, you'll often see that actually there's a lot of different variations of those going on. So when it comes to Amazon specifically, of the top 20 keywords, 10, half of them are consideration, and the rest are branded. When you look at Google, it's a lot more diverse. You've got consideration, awareness, and branded going on. When you look at YouTube, it's even more diverse for the term duvet cover. You've got branded, awareness, consideration, decision, and inspirational. And that can really help you to unlock the various pieces of content that you have, just in a different format. In other words, if in the past you've created a blog post, you can turn that into a video that might be really more suitable towards YouTube. So a summary of how to build an integrated search strategy. The first is have an engine-led strategy. Analyze search engine specific metrics. For example, things like search volume. Don't be just assuming that because it happens on Google, it's going to happen on Amazon and YouTube. Look at your analytics. Look at any third-party providers, such as, for example, Similarweb, and that will really help you to get a lot more insights that are highly relevant to a search engine. The second is to have a content-led strategy. And this is where we're not just thinking about content as creating blog posts because that's how we do things around here. It's making sure that we're thinking about loving unique content, and EAT. User-led content, doing and using the buyer's journey theory that we've seen in today's webinar. So I'm having a better idea of, okay, for my important business unit, whether that's for you doing paper or whatever the case may be, make sure you're categorizing those keywords and you're doing research to find other awareness keywords, other consideration, decision, inspirational keywords, because that can really help you to unlock that opportunity. And of course, if you want, you can also download our SERP feature report, highly relevant to today's webinar, because in this report, you can see the growth of YouTube ranking on Google, for example, through video SERP features, and other really, really interesting insights, such as, for example, local maps. And of course, if you also want to dig in, get access to some of the data, like, for example, Zeroclicked, simply come in. You can start your free trial. I believe the team behind the scenes have created a link on your screen now on the top left or right hand side. That's where you can then book one of those demos and see some of today's data for keywords that matter to you. So now I'm going to open it up to the floor, and thanks so much for everyone's time for a Q&A.
We have a few questions that have come in, so I will go right ahead and ask the first one from Nestor. This is clearly a process for B2C products, but what would be an ideal strategy for B2B products? Google versus YouTube versus Amazon?
Really good question. So the audience is completely different, and you're absolutely right. Today's webinar has been much more biased towards business to consumer. However, business to business users are also looking for content relevant to that audience. So it's really making sure that when you're doing that, you're actually adapting your strategy. So if you're optimizing for both audiences, you want to make sure, for example, on YouTube, you have a B2B channel, in which case it's actually going to talk about other things, like, for example, how to scale a new coffee machine across a restaurant chain. That can be really, really incredibly useful. What other hints and tips can you give brands when they kind of get a product and better understand it globally? How can I train a range of different staff on, if I were to buy 3 types of coffee machines, really good videos that are highly relevant to that audience? So in answer to your question, you have to adapt your strategy for a different audience, as well as separate it out and making sure you're not mixing B2B with B2C content in the one video playlist, for example.
Excellent. Thank you, Gerald. Our next question is from Sarah, and she wants to know, where do we find zero-click data? Does Google provide this?
No, it doesn't actually. It's actually a unique Similarweb metric. So we have a range of different data sources. One is what we call a contributory network, and that actually allows us to analyze real user behavior data. So definitely check out the trial, even book a demo with a team if you want. You can get it on similarweb.com, but you'll get all of the Zeroclick there. And in fact, hopefully I do not get a slap in the wrist for this. We're actually going to trend Zeroclick metric out within the next few months. So you can actually see trended Zeroclick over time, i.e., does a lot more Zeroclicks occur in December versus January of the calendar year?
Great. Thanks, Gerald. Another question has come in. I've only ever looked at Google search, but YouTube would be very relevant for my audience. What are YouTube's core ranking factors?
So when it comes to YouTube specifically, it's all around engagement primarily. So it's making sure that, yes, we're doing the things we covered today, like getting likes, shares, comments and stuff. But crucially, from an analytic perspective, the thing you want to be looking at is making sure that people are viewing the entire video, or as much of that video as possible. And the reason why we say that is that's a big signal in YouTube's eyes, because what they're trying to work out is this an actual good video where it gets a lot of engagement? So by that, one of the big things and one of the big ranking factors as a result that they look at is, are people coming on, seeing this video and watching it in full? That is a very strong indication that the video is actually good. And they'll actually in the back end tie that to that keyword, and that'll help you to rank for that topic and term.
Great. We have another question from Diugu. Where can we see the search volume by region for a specific keyword? And what's the best tool for this?
Yeah, so I'm working for Similarweb, of course. I'm going to say Similarweb, but let me honestly explain why. A lot of other tools out there use Google AdWords Keyword Planner. Now, the reality is, and again, this isn't a negative thing on Google at all, but the reality is Google makes most of its money, over 90%, from paid search. Now, what it does when it gives search volume, just to get a bit more technical from a paid search perspective, it uses a thing called broad match modified. So in other words, that overinflates the demand for a term. So what you'll notice is, and whatever tools you guys are using for search, have a look and see how many duplicated keywords from a search volume can you see. Does it treat plural and single terms the same? It will, because it's using Google. Because Google wants more people to bid on terms. As a result, their auction is bigger. And as a result, of course, they make more money. What we do is we actually, as mentioned before in the Zeroclick question, we have a contributory network. So we actually know what people are searching for at a country level. So actually we have our own metric called hybrid search volume. And in essence, what that does is gives you a much more accurate view of search volume. So I would highly recommend Similarweb search volume metric when you're looking at search volume as a metric.
Great. Another question in from Nestor. Thank you for answering the first question. And that would be the ideal approach, brand, or what would be the ideal approach, brand or non-brand keywords? For B2B products, do you consider ranking competitors' branded keywords?
Good question, actually. Yeah, because that tends to come up a little bit more in B2B. Yes, in answer to your question, yes, but also think about the generic or non-branded opportunities. So remarkably, even when you look at your own brand, make sure you're maximizing that. So it's things like, in fact, when it comes to SERP features, you can actually create SERP features for your own branded terms. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, we work for Adidas. Let's say Adidas ranks really well for the term Adidas. But actually, when we do a search for things like Adidas customer service email, and let's say the results are just fairly boring, so they're just like regular web listings, we can actually create content to actually come up and pop up for an instant answer for Adidas. We can use things like schema. We can really beef out and lay out our content on our page. So our branded keywords themselves can become a huge opportunity. When it comes to competitors' brands, it's even more important in the B2B landscape. So yes, optimize for your brand or your competitors' branded terms too, because the reality is people will also be looking for that. But if they can find you and you've got a really good EAT strategy, and actually, in fact, so much so that your content is better than the manufacturers, you can outrank them as well. And we've seen this across the board for some huge brands, like, for example, in the electrical space, LG. We've even seen retailers outranking the LG TV manufacturer for their own TV terms. So it can be done if done right, and making sure that you're thinking about EAT constantly.
Great. We have a question from Benjamin. Can you please speak to the relationship between zero-clicked keywords and natural language processing? Should we assume that high percent zero-clicked keywords are keywords we don't want to include unless it's natural?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because when it comes to NLP, essentially it means voice search for the most part, but also it's why search engines like Google have invented certain parts of their algorithm. So you'll often have seen, actually a few years ago, they've invented a thing called BERT, which basically means that the search engines are now starting to move away from what does the searcher mean for this query, and thinking about what are they likely to search for next, so that they can then start having a better conversation. So when it comes to zero click and NLP, what it means is keywords that have high zero clicks, it actually can often be because of the search engine results page itself. So in other words, if you were to do a search for things like Joe Biden age, it'll say it on the SERP itself. As a result, it's often highly likely that that particular keyword has a lot of zero clicks. Now, whilst that is actually, strictly speaking, it's an NLP query, because it's literally like something you would ask someone as a human being. There isn't a direct correlation to say because it's NLP, it's going to have a high zero click. What we need to do is separate them out. So what I mean by that is using zero click to find good keywords that have the potential to drive traffic. And secondly, create content that people actually search for using NLP techniques, neuro linguistic programming.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for that, Gerald. We have one more question, and we still have time for questions, so please get them in if you have them. So, what did you mean by double bubble?
So by double bubble, what we meant is sometimes when you do a search, you'll often see that there's one website ranks twice and often right between each other. So let's say, for example, you've got three results. The first one is one brand, the second one is the same brand. That is what we would call a double bubble. So what it means is essentially that the search engine is allowing a brand to dominate the results because it actually is there twice. So in other words, it's almost like a little bonus, if you like. And that's what we often call in the industry a double bubble. Basically, it just means one website having more than one position on the results page.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Gerald, for this engaging presentation. And a quick note to our audience, we have a couple of handouts in the handout section. So go ahead and click on that link for the free trial. And there's also a report in there that will come in handy for you. So again, thank you, Gerald, for this presentation. And if we
More
didn't
than
get
welcome.
to your comments or questions, we will be sure to pass it along to the team at Similarweb. On behalf of Search Engine Land, I want to thank everyone in our audience for attending today's webinar. We hope you join us again soon.
Thanks very much, guys.